The great kingdom of Nzari had once been a land of laughter and abundance, where the rivers ran deep and the forest whispered the songs of old. But peace is a fragile thing, and one night, under the cover of darkness, the kingdom burned. A brutal civil war, led by power-hungry warlords, turned the palace into a battlefield. The king and queen were slain, their bodies lost to the flames, and the throne stood empty, soaked in the blood of the fallen. Amidst the chaos, a boy, no more than 12, was pulled from the ruins by the last loyal warriors. That boy was Khamari, the only surviving heir to the kingdom. He was too young to bear the weight of a crown, yet there was no other choice. His advisors, the few who had survived the massacre, placed the heavy crown upon his head. But in times like these, trust was a luxury few could afford. Yet through the storm of treachery, one figure remained by his side, Zuberi. They had grown up together, wrestling in the palace courtyards, stealing fruit from the royal kitchens. Zuberi was not of noble blood, but his father had been a high-ranking advisor, granting him access to the same education, the same training. When Khamari became king, he made Zuberi his anchor, because who best to trust than a childhood friend? Where the young ruler was cautious, Zuberi was bold. Where Khamari hesitated, Zuberi acted. And because he had stood by him through the fires of war, Khamari trusted him blindly. For years, their bond seemed unbreakable. But power, like an ember, does not stay small when fanned by ambition. By the time Khamari reached manhood, his rule had stabilized. The kingdom, once on the brink of ruin, was rebuilding. The people saw him as a wise king, a survivor who had fought for his birthright. Yet behind every decision, Zuberi's fingerprints could be found. He advised on trade, on war, on alliances. His voice carried weight not just in the palace, but in the streets. His presence was so constant, so entwined with the king's rule, that people began to wonder. Does the throne belong to Khamari, or does Zuberi wear the crown in secret? But Khamari, oblivious to the whispers, dismissed such concerns. Zuberi is my brother in all but blood. If I cannot trust him, then who is left to trust? What Khamari failed to see was that Zuberi, though he had meant well all these years, had a weakness. He had always been drawn to women, the thrill of conquest, the challenge of pursuit. And when he set his sights on a woman, he did not rest until she was his. Some of the king's officers had tried to draw his attention, but Khamari wouldn't listen. His childhood friend was a saint. Then came Amina. She was a foreign princess, sent to Nzari as a diplomatic offering, betrothed to King Khamari. Amina was unlike any woman Zuberi had ever known, poised, intelligent, and untouched by the world's corruption. She was, in every sense, untouchable. And yet, Zuberi wanted her. At first, it was mere admiration. Then it became longing. And soon, it turned into a whispering hunger, one that gnawed at him every time he saw her at Khamari's side. Why should she belong to the king? Why should anything belong to Khamari when he, Zuberi, had been the one to guide him, to shape him, to build his rule? That was when his loyalty soured into resentment. But Zuberi did not act impulsively. He knew that to take Amina, he would have to take the throne itself. And so, he began to weave a plan. His influence over the kingdom was already vast. Commanders sought his approval, advisors whispered in his ear. He spent years carefully selecting soldiers who would be loyal to him above all else. And when he was certain that his grip on the army was strong enough, he made his move. One evening, he met Amina in secret. Under the guise of soft words and charm, he revealed his plan. Khamari is nothing without me. You know this. And when he is gone, the kingdom will need a strong ruler and a strong queen. Amina, ever composed, listened intently. Her face betrayed nothing. And if I refuse, she asked, then you will learn that a king's widow is still a widow. Zuberi believed he had her. He believed that she, a woman raised in the delicate world of royal courts, would succumb to his will. But he had underestimated her. The coup was planned for the night of the full moon. The palace would be lightly guarded. Most of the soldiers stationed outside the gates were Zuberi's men. He would lead them inside, strike down Khamari while he slept, and by sunrise, a new king would reign. But as he marched through the palace gates with his army at his back, something went wrong. Instead of the smooth march to power, a heavy silence hung in the air. Then, one by one, the soldiers stopped. Then, one by one, they lowered their swords. Confused, Zuberi turned to his men, his voice sharp. What are you doing? The time is now. Then he saw her. Amina stood beside Khamari on the palace steps, draped in royal robes, her gaze unwavering. Zuberi, the king's voice was calm, steady. Did you truly believe you could take my throne with my own soldiers? Realization crashed over Zuberi like a wave. The soldiers he had spent years grooming had been played. Amina, under the pretense of loyalty to his plan, had fed every word back to Khamari. The king had simply waited, letting Zuberi gather his own news. And now, standing before the throne he had tried to steal, Zuberi understood he had never truly held power. He had only ever been allowed to believe he did. Zuberi was not executed. That would have been too merciful. Instead, he was stripped of his name, his wealth, his place in the kingdom. His face, once known and respected, became one of disgrace. The people who had once bowed in his presence now turned away as he passed. And so, the man who had been the second most powerful figure in Nzari became nothing, a lesson carved into the bones of history. King Khamari ruled long and wisely, but he never again trusted so blindly. And the elders of Nzari told his tale for generations, so that all who sought power would remember. The fire that warms you today may be the very one that consumes you tomorrow.